Hola, ¿qué tal? Me llamo Scott. Soy de Estados Unidos. Nací en Pennsylvania, pero desde hace más de 40 años vivo en California. Y estoy aprendiendo español. Obviamente no hablo muy bien. So I'm going to switch to English now. And because I speak English very well, of course. No, 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 I don't. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Seriously. Today I'm just going to make a little introductory video about my journey in learning Spanish. My journey, which essentially started this summer. Why learn Spanish, or why am I learning Spanish? Well, I guess it really goes back to my early childhood when I first learned that there was such a thing as another language. It was so intriguing to me. When I was about 6 years old, my parents were good friends with another couple, and the wife was a native Spanish speaker. I don't recall which country she was from, but because my parents lost touch with them many, many years ago. But I distinctly remember, it was such a memorable moment for me. One time I was around 6, maybe 7 years old, and we were taking a trip. A road trip in the car, and we were sitting in the back seat, my mom's friend and I, and she thought it would be fun to teach me some Spanish. And well, really just counting, just the numbers 1 to 10. And I did. I learned it. I learned to count. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, siete. And I thought that was so cool. It was so cool. I was so proud of myself. I was able to say numbers in a different language. And I say ever since that point, I've been enamored. Would have loved to speak Spanish. So in high school was my first opportunity, essentially. They offered Spanish classes, and so in 9th grade, I took Spanish, and I loved it. I did every assignment. I don't think I got anything wrong on any test I ever took for the first year. And then what happened? The second year, halfway through the year, my family moved. We moved to a different state. And so I switched high schools, and taking Spanish there followed a completely different curriculum, a completely different program of study. And so I felt like really behind. I did not know, I didn't have the base, the buildup of the vocabulary that they had learned and everything in this class. So I struggled quite a bit, and the teacher was not sympathetic to me, to say the least, and very discouraging. And so that experience just turned me off so much. I didn't take Spanish after that. 2 years, that was it. And in college, when I was required to take a language, I studied German. And so I never revisited Spanish. But 40 years later, Netflix rolls around, and I start watching a lot of TV shows. I love watching international TV shows, all different, from different countries, different languages. But I've been watching a lot of Spanish. Of course, Casa de Papel, Money Heist, and many others. And so I just enjoyed hearing. You don't learn much, with subtitles, but I like hearing the language. And my wife and I are considering, in a few years, when we're empty nesters and retired completely, we may move to a Spanish-speaking country, be it Spain or South America or Mexico. Costa Rica, we've been to Costa Rica before and really like it there. But when we've lived in Europe, we lived in Europe for nearly 2 years back in the 90s and really enjoyed that experience. We lived in Switzerland and but would love to go back there. We would love to go back there again, but the cost of living is just really high, and especially if you're on a retirement fixed income, maybe that's not the best idea. So anyway, we're thinking seriously of doing a trip next summer to Spain, just to visit. When we lived in Europe, we had never had a chance to visit Spain, but so we'd really like to do that. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'll try to learn some Spanish ahead of time, give myself a year and see if I can pick up some of the language. So I started looking around at different apps. Obviously, Duolingo is the popular one, and I'm searching reviews to see what people had success with. And I settled on Babbel, which is similar to Duolingo, maybe a little less gimmicky. And I gave that a try, and it was fun. It's fun. Like they teach you the words, a vocabulary, and structures, and they try to put things in context a little bit, and repeat, show you the words in different ways, and that's all good. And I was progressing. You progress. The units are fairly small. So you feel a sense of accomplishment. And as I was ticking along, I was humming through these things, and then I'd realize, like 4 lessons ago, what were those words? I didn't think I was retaining that much. You can click along and you can go and okay, this is fine. Now they do review. The reviews in there are supposed to take care of that. And since then, I still use it now, a few months later, but I use it in a much different way than when I started. But maybe I'll get into that later. So anyway, I'd say after a few weeks of Babbel, I started to look for YouTube videos. Essentially I wanted to hear the language. I wanted to hear it and understand it. I was looking for something like Sesame Street in Spanish. I guess that does exist, but maybe less infantile. So that's when I discovered comprehensible input. I never heard that word before, but I heard some teachers using that word in some videos, and I watched a few videos, and wow, that was like a revelation, really. That's exactly what I was looking for. Speaking the language and in a way that you can understand, giving not only context or other clues as to the meanings, and geared for different levels, for beginners or so on, especially for me as a pretty much a complete beginner, because I don't remember anything from high school Spanish. Yo tengo a afilar mi lápiz. That's about it. So that's soon. If you look for videos, anything comprehensible input, soon enough you discover Dreaming Spanish. And so that's what I have been using really since late July, the last 3 months almost. What is it now? Yeah, almost 3 months. I'm just every day getting comprehensible input, and that's the majority right now of how I'm learning the language. And it's been pretty good. Well, what's also fascinating is learning how to learn in a way. Like, how does the brain work, and how do you acquire the language? That's the other thing. There's a distinction between learning per se and acquiring the language. The former being kind of more putting the language in your conscious mind, learning the rules and words as they relate to your native language, that is translating to your native language. And I think acquiring is something else. Acquiring is kind of building up the foundation. Building up first, you build the foundation of you get the sound. the sound and the meanings, obviously, but the meanings not necessarily translated to your native language, right? So, okay, lápiz, you hear the word lápiz, somebody using the word lápiz, and you just associate the word with the thing, right? You don't say pencil. You don't see it written down, pencil, lápiz, pencil, because then you're thinking lápiz, pencil, and then you have this extra step in your mind when you're either generating the word, like what's the word for this, or what have you, or translating back, right? So I think it's a distinction. It's a little bit of a subtle distinction in a way, in that the word is not the thing, right? The words are not things, and so there's never really a word for word. I mean, sometimes some simple objects or simple things there might be, but a lot of times there's not. And the language in general is not just single words. It's like the flow and how the language flows. And so I think just getting a feel, a sense for that is something else. And that's where you acquire it. Like you're just, in a sense, feeling and attaching, making connections to the words and the flow, or I guess I resist using the word grammar again, because these terms right now, I'm not that concerned with. I'm not really concerned with conjugating words. I don't want to be at this point, right? What I've come to learn or realize or believe, I guess, is that there is a good order. There is a good order to learn a language. You don't necessarily have to follow that order, and probably most people don't, especially if we learn it in a traditional way. But I think maybe the most efficient order of learning a language, what I've come to believe, and is getting this input first. Like first you hear it and you make sense of the meanings of things. Just a lot. You build up this foundation. You build up a foundation, and then on top of that, you can do other things, and I think it's much easier. So this is why we don't even speak much. Like, we don't practice speaking at the beginning. It's not that speaking is not important. It is. It will be important eventually. But it's just like, I feel like there is an order and getting the foundation first. Now, in Dreaming Spanish, Pablo, who designed the program based on other programs that he's learned, he specifically would recommend not speaking at all at the beginning, like say the first, I don't know what it is, 600 hours of input maybe, 400, 500, 600 hours, something like that, of input, just not to speak, because you would, you might struggle for one, and you might not have all the sounds and pronounce incorrectly a lot of words as well, because you don't have that foundation, you don't have the buildup. However, in my case, I feel like it's a good thing to not have to, right? At the beginning, to just give yourself the freedom, and if you have the luxury that you don't have to, that's great. That's fantastic. And that's probably the best way, because I'd rather spend my time with the input than the output, right, at this stage. Amassing that foundation, right? And so the interesting thing is, you do realize that you don't even know it. You kind of learn it, but without realizing that you're learning it, I think. The things become more concrete, and you kind of add to that, slowly, poco a poco. Yeah, a little more, just like drops in the ocean. And Dreaming Spanish is very good. I mean, Pablo's been doing this since 2017, I think, and there's thousands of videos, essentially. And so different levels, they've categorized them at different levels, which is very helpful. And chances are you can find something you're interested in, because that is the other key. And this is my main takeaway. The thing that I've discovered probably is being interested in what you're listening, the input that you have, right? So it's not a chore, number one. It's entertaining and something you want to do and something you would want to keep doing regularly. Now, as a teacher, I would think it's very complicated. It's probably not easy making a video. It's one thing to say comprehensible input, and you could easily just show a picture or whatever and point out and just say what the names are in Spanish. But that's kind of boring, number one. And then you're also not hearing natural speech. And I think even at the very beginning, just hearing natural speech, even if you don't understand all the words, you might get enough of it with drawing pictures, as Pablo does a lot in the beginner videos, and other teachers too. I just mentioned Pablo because I've watched by far more of his videos because he has so many of the beginner ones, and I went through a lot of those early on, and some super beginner as well, super beginner videos. But keeping your interest is also very, very important, and just having a vast number. I think that's kind of the philosophy or the mission of Dreaming Spanish, and the reason he's got so many different teachers is not only to hear different accents and how different people speak, which is very, very helpful, but they might cover different topics, and you'd have more of a chance that you would find something that you're interested in, be able to amass the hours, because the hours required is a lot, a lot. And you don't realize, when I started, I would think because I'm not used to watching that much YouTube, but now I'm like a YouTube addict. I started out watching 3 hours a day, something like that. And that seemed like a ton, man. And then even after 50 hours of that, you're like, wow, you felt like you already put in so much time, but it's really nothing compared to what you need. So it just gives you some sense of how much is required to hear at the beginning. Man, I'm rambling on. This is way too long. I was going to talk about more things. I don't know if I could edit this down somewhat. Maybe I can. This video is probably going to look choppy because I'm going to edit out all this and try to make it shorter. So anyway, yeah, being interested is really, really the key. And that's the thing I've discovered. Moving on, early on, with Dreaming Spanish, at the very beginning, it's easy to be interested, to expand your sphere of interest, so to speak, because just understanding the language is interesting in and of itself, right? But that only goes so far. After so many times hearing fiesta, or, gets a little old. So I found that I would branch out into higher level videos. I started watching some intermediate videos even before I even had 100 hours, I think, of input. But I would look for things that I was really interested in, and I discovered that I was really interested in how to learn the language. And there are a lot of videos that Pablo's done about the philosophy behind Dreaming Spanish and good ways that he believes are to acquire the language. And with that sphere of vocabulary, it wasn't too difficult to understand, and I started to watch a lot of those kinds of videos. So anyway, since then, now I've got about 300 hours total input, about 250 of which is over 250, I think, is of Dreaming Spanish. I started to log some hours outside of Dreaming Spanish. Again, as you get a little bit more of a level, it's interesting to find other videos that you could watch, or podcasts. I've got well over 50 hours outside the platform that I've logged. There's other things that I watch, some TV shows that I'll watch and things, but I don't log those hours if I'm not really understanding a lot of it, or if I'm watching something, YouTube videos, that I'm not even understanding that much or paying that much attention to it, I won't bother. But I have been listening to podcasts. I discovered Español con Juan through one of Pablo's videos, actually, talking about podcasts or recommended podcasts, and that was one. And so when I first started listening to podcasts, I found his, and it was very accessible. I like his. It's really geared to low intermediate, maybe just pre-intermediate, up to advanced level speakers or learners of the language. And I found it pretty easy to understand, actually, even though he's got the Andaluz accent. He tones it down. He tries to speak clearly, or slow enough, with enough pauses between words that he can pronounce the words pretty well. But he doesn't speak too slow. So that's the thing I like. And oftentimes he repeats himself quite often. And the thing I notice is maybe when he's first introducing something, he might go slow and repeat it. But then if he's repeated it a bunch, then he starts to say it fast, and that's the thing I discovered, that slowing it down doesn't really help me understand that much. I'd almost rather just hear regular speed. Usually it's the fact that I don't understand the word is what's going to keep me from understanding. Or when you speak normally, the words are not, there's no pause in between the word, in between the word. So they're all mushed together a bit, and it can be a little bit harder to pick out, I guess, and that might be the reason. But even in the Dreaming Spanish video, even when I was like less than 50 hours watching some of these beginner and super beginner videos especially, they'd be slow. The teachers often talk very, very slow, and I would just have to speed it up because it was uncomfortable and not interesting. I would lose interest, right? When you speak so slow, and also it can sound condescending. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. So, but you have the option. You can speed up the video, and so that really helps too. You can do that, and so what I've discovered, I think when listening to one of the podcasts, it was a couple weeks ago, I came to the realization, like the reasons that I started learning the Spanish are still there. They still exist. But it just added to it because I've just come to love it. I've come to love the language and hearing it and the culture behind it. And that's the other thing. When you learn the language, you're not just learning the words and stuff, but where do the words come from? Like, what's the culture behind it, underneath it? And with Spanish, it's a diverse culture, many countries speak the language, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to learn the culture and about the people and hearing all different people speak it. And of course, hearing points of view of people and from other countries. It's all fascinating and it's interesting. And yeah, I would say that's my biggest recommendation to anybody learning the language, maybe anything, is to find the love in it, right? And it's easy to say, oh, just love, but how does that come about? How do you do that? And I think it's really familiarity, maybe just being exposed to something so much, but in a low stress way, in a no stress way, if you can. And that's why I think it's also very important at the beginning that you don't stress at all. It's not like learning a list of words or like grammatical structure, conjugate the verbs all correctly, That's a chore. I know that's probably the reason I didn't learn it for so long, because I always felt like it was a chore to learn a language and a lot of effort. Now, it's not to say that there's not time involved, because there's so much time involved in getting this input. But it's fun, right? And if it's something you like to do, then it'll happen. Anyway, this video is really long, so I was going to talk about a few other things, but maybe I'll make more videos. I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to watch this anyway. Who cares? Anyway, so we'll say goodbye. Hasta luego. Adios.